righty, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. We are joined by two individuals, one of them from SAS, Lars Arne, and also Magnus from DNB Bank. They have both come all the way from Norway to be here today. So thank you guys. And they will be presenting on real-time credit decisioning in the cloud with SAS Viya and Python. And we'll save some time at the end for some questions in case you guys have any. But you guys can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Anderson. And thank you all for attending to this session. Lars Arne and myself, as Anderson said, we will be talking about real-time credit scoring in the cloud using SAS Viya and Python. But first, I'll do a bit of a hindsight. I started working with this part, or SAS, in 2022, September. I got approximately from my manager 4 days to decide should we go for Viya or should we stay on 9.4 or do something else. As you probably understand from the topic, we decided to go for Viya. But at the time that I started, we had this old workhorse 9.4, which had performed like a good champion over the years. But it was starting to be kind of an old horse. And then SAS came with Viya, the stallion in the cloud. So that was kind of a bit of a hindsight on what I was pressed with in the beginning. I had no experience with SAS whatsoever at that point. And well, by just doing a short POC, we decided, let's go. Let's start the negotiations with SAS on moving to Viya. So Lars Arne,
yep, thank you.
You're up next.
So can all of you hear what I'm saying? Okay, let's do, I wanted to do a quick poll. How many of you are on a cloud journey? A few. Good. How many are contemplating, if you didn't raise your hand, or planning and will happen shortly? Okay, good. Because I wanted to make a point of it's harder than it looks, but it's feasible. And what I wanted to share is like how we, because Magnus and I and a whole lot of others, were going through the process. Negotiations is one part, but the practical process, how can we actually make this work? And I thought at this time it might make sense to reflect on how it used to be and how it typically is. Because we as SAS, we make software, we package it, and we deliver to customers like DNB. They install it and run it. That's the world, and we're still living in that world. But then DNB had this cloud-first strategy, which meant essentially preference for running things in the cloud. And they already did for a while. I'm banking with DNB through a mobile app that is serviced from the cloud. So they already have data in the cloud, they have applications in the cloud, and quite critical business applications are already there. And the same with us. We knew this was coming. So we have re-architected all of our software to be cloud native. And we're also prepared to run it for you. So we have, now we're calling it SAS Managed, so we can run that for you. And it's cloud native, so that means it's actually designed differently. It has to run on Kubernetes, which is the way one would typically orchestrate cloud native components these days. And let's check my notes. Yeah, I wanted to make a point. It has to be this way. And so the latest generation of the software is now called differently. It used to be RTDBM, it used to be Enterprise Guide. Now it's SAS Studio. It's Visual Model Studio, Model Manager, and Intelligent Decisioning. And it runs on Azure, but it also can run on Amazon. In theory, it can also run on OpenShift on-prem. But it makes it has to have an underlying cloud-based infrastructure. And also although we are running on the cloud, we're actually running on the same cloud. It's actually on the same data centers. We're owned by different owners. So we own our own. So SAS, we call it the SAS tenant, and then it's a DNB tenant. So that needs to communicate securely between us. So I thought I would cover 3 areas: like information security, and how we align with the workflows that DNB is working with, and performance and stability. And maybe that might be obvious. There was a time when the cloud was deemed not secure enough. Now it's the other way around. The cloud is by far probably the most secure place to run anything, any compute environments. But then there was this Schrems 2 verdict that basically the outcome of that was all regulated industries in Europe. They are enforcing that data has to reside in Europe. And in the beginning also, there was a concern on where data, some countries might even have country-specific requirements. I don't think Norway has that anymore, but in the beginning, it would be easier if we could run on Norwegian soil. So it so happened that Azure has a data center in Norway, which is actually fairly close to where DNB is physically located. So we have that, but then some different tenants. So we have our tenant and their tenant. And we called it SAS Cloud back then. And the other point is for Viya to be able to do anything meaningful, you need to have access to corporate resources or data resources. So we wanted access to, or Viya needed access to DNB's data resources, and it's Teradata, DB2 and all of that. So what you typically did in the past is you can open the port. So connectivity is there, you can just open the port. One thing, Magnus is very clear, that's not even allowed. But the reason why a bank would be cautious of it is because you widen the attack surface. So you increase the risk of exposure to that data. So that's kind of out of the question, you don't do that. But then we have something called CDE, Cloud Data Exchange, which enables DNB to control all the access from Viya to, so they can fine-tune how, well, there's one point of managing access to those corporate data resources. So that's the point. And it's controlled totally by DNB. So we needed to have that. Is there another point, maybe? No, I think we're good. Then, let's look into this. This is, I care about development, so I wanted to, and I want to emphasize the I don't know, the curly lines are deliberate. This is the vision, and it's also the way most organizations will work. So you develop yourself. It has to go through what is called software development lifecycle. You test it before you go to production. And banks, and DNB in particular, have to define a change management process. And when you do so, you actually have to abide by that change management process. And a core to how DNB does that, I don't know, Magnus will touch on that later, is they rely on Git to make that work. Then that means when you're developing artifacts with Viya, that also needs to work with Git. So we worked together on that. There were certain things, and there was one incident in particular because I remember last year, early 2024, the integration with Azure repos didn't work anymore. And it was because, I mean, you would think Git is Git, and I also thought Git was Git, but it's kind of managed or delivered by a piece of software. And they tightened the authentication model. So, and we were puzzled, and it turns out we were not the only one, but again, it was important. I remember how Magnus was pushing us to get that fixed. We thought it would take 6 months because we relied on a community-driven library that everybody used. So it was easy just to use that, but that didn't work, and then maybe we need to build everything ourselves again. But then I talked to Microsoft people, and everybody pitched in, and we were able to figure that out. So, and also because of Magnus' strong voice, we got attention and support to get focus on fixing it. So through a combination of finding the community support, we were able to do this in a couple of months. But it was a bit, because it was important, and we were about to go live, and it didn't work. And now we're working with them to get this even further, because DNB has even automated this through CI/CD, which relies on Git, and there's still work that needs to be done there. And we're working as we speak. I think there was a meeting last week, because it's kind of supported, but it needs some manual work still. So I want to point out, and this is important, Git in this case is more than a piece of software that geeks like I find fascinating. It's a vital part of the change management process. So it's Azure DevOps in this case, and Azure pipelines. And then a little bit before I give it back, because I want to touch on high availability. We play with the title, this is a critical shift, because this is a business critical artifacts or services by DNB. We're literally serving people like myself and others who want to have a car loan or a mortgage. They're serviced by these functions. So they need to work all the time. You can argue that when you build the model, that's only for DNB employees or people like me going to work, so it needs to work in business hours. But typically when you apply for a mortgage or especially a car loan, that's when on Saturday when you're going to the car dealer. So it needs to work typically outside of business hours or during lunch breaks when you have the time to apply for the loan. So I think it's even regulated. So if it doesn't work, the authorities need to be called. But anyways, and the way we did this is to have, and this is also standard practice, you have to have redundancies. We differ between the design environment where you build the models and build the decision flows, and the runtime environment where they're run, the real time. And that needs to be more stable than the other one, you could say. That's the easiest ways to look at it. So, and to make it stable, it's redundant, and the load balancer will figure out if the one is down, then we'll go to the other one. So it's a Kubernetes cluster that spans 2 availability zones, which is a very typical way of doing this. And also Oracle, the database, also need to span. So that's one part, to make sure that the runtime environment needs to work, but it also needs to be stable. And you have to go through the system development lifecycle to make sure that it's properly tested in a separate environment, typically called system integration test environment, and then test it again to make sure that it can run similar to how it's supposed to run in the production environment, which is called UAT, or user acceptance test. So I thought by that, yeah, I think let's try. Yeah, let's Magnus take it to the finish line.
Yeah, thank you, Lars-Arne. So, doesn't work. Okay. There we go.
There.
Yeah, so basically, I'm going a bit back again. I had a few selection criteria. I've written 5 here. There's actually 6. I'm going back to the last one because it is actually at least the most important one these days. But yeah, as Lars-Arne said, we have a strategy with cloud first. We need to have exceptionally good business cases for staying on premises. Everything should be in the cloud. Everything should run on scalable services so that you minimize the cost when business is not doing its work. So between 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. and 7 a.m. in the morning, the cost should be as minimal as possible. It needs to be a modern and scalable platform. That's why we also utilize Kubernetes, where the containers spin up when you need them. At least if you maintain it yourself. We utilize what's called a hosted managed service, or managed service now. where we've bought fixed capacity. It needs to be secure. Of course, as Lars Arne said, we were not allowed to connect directly to our internal databases from an external tenant. That would leave our network infrastructure vulnerable for attack. So we found a solution with the Cloud Data Exchange there. Sorry, I forgot to click as well. Also, there's one point that I hope is coming soon with SAS, and that is bring your own key encryption. Currently, or at least when we set it up, it's not supported. I haven't checked right now if it is supported now, but hopefully someone can tell me during Innovate. It needs to be cost efficient. It needs to run in a, as I said, scale up and down when you need it. Since we bought a managed service, I really didn't have to think about that. And then the last piece of the puzzle that I myself could do anything about was competency. I needed to decide if I had the competency internally in my team to operate SAS Viya in DNB's tenant, or if I had to do it as a hosted managed service. The decision was, well, I might have the competency in 4 or 5 years, but right now, definitely not. So we decided to go with the hosted managed service, meaning that SAS does everything for us in the Viya environment. I also had to make a decision whether should we do scoring as we do today, or should we migrate to Python or R or something else that's supported on the Viya platform. The decision I then made was, well, if I'm going to be able to run this in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years time and be responsible for it, I need to largen the market of engineers that I can get into my team, ensuring that I have enough people to operate this at any point of time. So that's why I made the decision. We are going to do a rewrite of everything while we're migrating to Viya. That means going from SAS or these two to Python. The last topic is also then the one that I get asked a lot. I know Lars Arne is tired of hearing it, and that is exit strategy. I also need to be able to provide to our financial authorities a realistic option to move out of any vendor within 30 to 90 days. If I write everything in SAS, well, I could throw 100 people at it and hope that we make it. Or I could migrate to open source and then say, that's our exit strategy. We can move our containers to run in our own tenant, if I need to. I hope to God I never have to do it, because running Kubernetes isn't always, or it is complex. So, yeah, I touched a bit upon it. The migration strategy. Should I move everything as is? Or should I find my tools, set everything up, and migrate and modernize while I migrate? The decision was, of course, to do the modernization when we migrated. Yeah, we utilized the hosted managed service in Azure Norway East, meaning that we have high availability. We have an option to have disaster recovery in another region if we want that. What was also important was the support for open source, having a realistic exit strategy. Being quickly able to move certain components out of the current runtime environment. That doesn't mean everything. What's important to move would be the real-time scoring. Everything else isn't business critical. And then, of course, develop common components or common libraries used across all decisions or credit scoring credit scoring solutions that we build. I'll touch a bit upon that later again. So that's also why we use SAS Container Runtime. It integrates with intelligent decisioning that we use. It scales. It's performing quite good. Utilizing Python is a bit slower than just using SAS code, so be aware of that. It's approximately 50 to 100 milliseconds on large projects. We have also done, we're deploying all of our decisions and models into SAS Container Runtime. Yeah, Azure, it's located in Norway. Lars Arne touched upon it. There are actually specific laws in Norway with regards to where you can put stuff in the cloud. Luckily, credit scoring is not affected by it, but we still went ahead with utilizing the Azure Norway East. But let's get back to the technical implementation. What was important to me was open source, utilizing Python, Git, as Lars Arne touched upon. It's essential for us to have track of everything. Expose REST APIs and continuous integration, continuous development. So we started to migrate from SAS code to Python. ChatGPT helped me create some dummy code. I'm not even sure that it runs. So, but what was important here was writing everything new, gaining, having the people that reports to me realize what's actually happening in some of the decision flows, because some of them were quite old, or people had quit. They were complex with DS2 code that, my developers like, I don't really understand this. Now we have control over everything. We know what's happening. We utilize common component. We containerize everything. And we're also enabling our developers to do local development on their own computer. They don't necessarily have to go into SAS Viya to do their development, which makes them able. And utilizing Python gives you more flexibility with regards to, there's a lot more libraries out there that you can use. Open source libraries, of course, you have to check that they're not vulnerable for attacks or exposing you to some kind of threat. There's always a risk assessment made there. And now we can also do standardized common functionality, such as logging, for example. Every REST API call we get, we have a unique tracing ID. We need to add that to all of our logs for that specific decision. Okay, we have a library now. You import it, you use it, works out of the box. No, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you do your development. Utilizing Git as a version control of all our decision flows and models is important to us, because we need to be able to state to our regulators, okay, what was running in production at this moment? When we did this scoring, what was running? Can we reproduce that decision that we made? Yes. We just utilize the tag, spin it up in a separate environment, can do the scoring as it was at that moment the customer did applied for a mortgage or applied for a loan. It enables us to do better collaboration. We utilize a branching strategy, and it's also helped in a better way of doing distributed work, meaning people multiple people can work on the same decision flow without overwriting what others has done. We had that issue for a short while when we started doing Viya, where people were working on the same decision flow, clicking save, and then another one did the same thing at the same time, and then something went wrong. It enables us to do code reviews, 4 eyes principle on everything that goes into production. It also makes it easier to do audits and accountability to the people that actually does the changes. And probably the most important, automation. We can do CI/CD, get everything. I personally don't like any human hands touching anything after you have done your development. Deploying to test environments should be automated. Deploying to production should be automated. I don't like people going into the code. Yeah, now we're in test, then I need this variable to state test. That just means that something is going to go wrong at some point, and it has previously. We expose everything through REST APIs internally in DNB. We utilize OpenAPI 3 to do our API documentation. SAS supports OpenAPI 3 as well. It's simple to do. Takes a bit of time to kind of get used to the first time, but once you've done it once, it's easy. It also brings an extra layer of security for us because we have an internal requirement to utilize a system-to-system trust solution that's built inside of DNB, where we authenticate every call, ensuring that it comes from a trusted system. It's maintainable. It's independent of any programming language. You could throw Java, Rust, whatever you want on top of REST APIs or underneath REST APIs, it works. It also supports the domain-centric approach that DNB has with exposing APIs. So, meaning that I, who own the credit risk domain, exposes everything through REST API or domain APIs, hiding everything behind that, meaning that the calling system doesn't really care if it's SAS or anything else. It just needs to work. And we also, well, going back to the security part, sorry, I forgot to click, we had the issue with not being able to use the request headers when we used Python. That was also a blocker for us. So alongside of SAS, we were able to get this feature out. And it was quite quick. I think they used a couple of weeks to get it out. So, but it required good collaboration with SAS to get it prioritized. This is our setup for CI/CD today. We code in Python. We utilize Azure DevOps or SAS if you want to, as to code. We build using Azure DevOps in the test environments. We utilize Python for integration testing or Insomnia for just doing easy API requests or simple load testing. We deploy to ACR. We utilize Liquibase as our database management tool, which deploys to Oracle. And then we utilize SAS Container Runtime for our production and test SAS environment. We have logs in Splunk, provided by which SAS provides on a Kafka topic that we consume. So, all in all, this looks good. I wish we were here, where, well, we had continuous integration with Flux, meaning that everything we push to certain branches or tags in Git would automatically be deployed to ACR and then to SAS Container Runtime. Meaning that also then giving you the possibility to automate the whole process after you've developed and going into production. You would require a person, of course, to click deploy or do the git tag command to get it out in production. But we can automate basically everything from a change request, test report, unit testing, integration testing, everything. So this is what we're hoping for, working together with SAS. It's not going to be Flux, it's going to be Argo CD, most likely. So if you like this, please request the Argo CD setup that SAS is looking into. I need some help to get that prioritized. But key outcomes of our transition was we've now been able to do local development on our computer. It's easy, it's fast. We've developed, you cannot use this directly out of the box. So we have developed a wrapper that makes this code function in Viya. We can do simple local testing, spin up our container using Podman. Works quite good. Our development time has gone quite drastically down with regards to the decision flows, which previously used to look like this, but now looks like this. It's a dummy decision, but basically everything we do here is to ensure that we have the Oracle driver installed and the code that we're going to run. So this is a basic concept of the whole stack that we're using. We've even set up a Kubernetes cluster in DNB, which connects to Viya and SAS Container Runtime, enabling that we have a secure way of communicating with the real-time decision scorings. Lessons learned is that, well, Python, it's easy to learn, but it takes time to actually get good at. And the people or employees need to spend time getting into it. So I would not recommend doing what we did. Migrate first, then do the modernization. That would have given me a better sleep sometime at least. And the second point, use your local SAS representatives. Sometimes they are worth their weight in gold because they utilize R&D, they utilize internal SAS resources to figure out when you have issues. It's not been a journey that's been smooth into Viya. Well, 2 years ago, if you've told me, I would have, or asked me, I would have said this is not something that we should have done. Now, way more comfortable. SAS has learned a lot in the last 2 years. As Lars Arne pointed out, cloud is good, but it requires learning. Plan for updates far ahead. Do proper testing. We've learned that the hard way. I don't like being called on a Saturday having to rush into a meeting because everything is down. Because we haven't done our testing properly and SAS hasn't necessarily figured out that, oh, we're breaking for DNB. So have people available when SAS does the upgrades. We're not there yet with kind of the full CI/CD, everything in Python, but we're there soon. In 30 to 60 days, we're turning off the 9.4 setup, having migrated everything to Viya. There's one piece of the puzzle left that's being deployed in a couple of weeks' time. Yeah, getting back to it, development time. When I started in 2022, we set a record implementation time of 10 months. Now, I think we're down to 1 to 2 months of development. Has room for improvement, definitely, but a lot faster than we used to. So that is both thanks to the move to Python and also the scalability and the ease of doing stuff in Viya now than what we had in 9.4. So that's what we had. Yeah, I can also mention that these credit scoring applications are business critical. If they are down for more than half an hour, it's automatically a P1 or P2 incident. So then it's all hands on deck. So it's very important for us to have this run or perform very good. Even in the middle of the night, people apply for a mortgage on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, at New Year's. So it needs to be up and running all the time for all of our customers. Thank you. Any questions, or if not, then yeah, and you have a question and see me out here, just start a conversation with me.
Okay.